Hello, everyone. Thank you, judges. Thank you, Your Honor, and thank you to everyone who got me here tonight. So my name is Yasmine, and I'm an architecture student from Sudbury. I want to start by telling you about one of my school projects, where I went wrong, and how it led me to uncover a critical problem with today's urban design. So I was assigned to design a social brewery where people could taste and customize craft beer. Unlike a lot of my fellow students, I'm not much of a beer person, so I was looking for a way to make the project more interesting to me. I found out that honey could be used in the beer making process to give it different flavors, so I proposed a green roof for the brewery with the beekeeping system. That way, visitors could enjoy the new flavors, while the bees that created them could enjoy the green roof. So I was trying to achieve Sym-Bee-osis, which is when two organisms can benefit from each other. I find we think a lot about minimizing our impact on the environment, but I always wondered if we could think about exchanging something instead. So my idea of Sym-Bee-osis for my project was to connect the visitors to the exchange between nature and their drink. The honeybee has been on the environmental hot topic list for a long time, so I thought I was on the right track. But the more I got involved in the topic, the more I realized just how complex nature is. You see, we've had a long history with the honeybee, which is actually a non-native species that was imported from Europe. We often see ads and campaigns that tell us that the honeybee we've come to know is to thank for a third of our food supply. Most of that fraction, however, is done by things like butterflies, beetles, hummingbirds, and hundreds of bees actually native to the area. I have family and friends who were shocked to know that Canada had 800 species of bees that don't even produce honey. Some of them live underground. But why is this important? To understand our dependence on the honeybee, we have to look at our landscape. So agricultural farmland takes up a lot of space, and honeybees are used on a very large scale because they can be boxed up and moved from farm to farm. That means, however, that huge land masses are showing little to no biodiversity. So we have to use an outside pollinator because of how we've designed our landscapes. And why do we need a diversity of pollinators? Well, for one thing, it ensures we sustain a diversity of vegetation, and a lack of biodiversity in general means a lack of resilience to climate change. But we still need agriculture. So this is where my own problem came in, because for me, it was like getting to the conclusion section of a lengthy article only to read more research needs to be done on this topic. Habitat loss and the way we've disconnected green spaces and native plants is why Ontario is losing biodiversity in general. Ontario's rusty patch bumblebee has declined 90% in the last 10 years, and the Franklin bumblebee hasn't been seen since 2006. In the Greater Toronto Area alone, 110 out of their 180 animal species are at risk, and the part of southern Ontario, just below Toronto, is about to become the third largest urban region in North America. The top two, just New York and Los Angeles. Over several months, I got in touch with beekeepers, farmers, gardeners, and even Skyped with an architect in Norway who did her thesis on interacting with nature and how it affects human psychology. But after learning that the landscapes we've created are vulnerable and weak in the long run, I started thinking about my idea of symbiosis, of exchange, on a larger scale. So I got in touch with a design thinker named Sarah Bergman. She's the founder and director of Pollinator Pathway, which is a design for, it's a proposal for how cities, farms, and wilderness should interact. So she really opened my eyes to the role cities can play in balancing the lack of biodiversity inherent to farms. And the answer is connection. Her proposal for the planet is that we start connecting fragmented green spaces using underused areas. In Ontario, yes, we have plants and trees and parks, but because they're isolated from one another, these areas behave like islands separated by urban density. Biodiversity simply can't pass through or thrive in this kind of environment. The pollinator pathway started in Seattle, where 2 large green spaces are now connected with native plants along an underused area. The project today is internationally recognized and literally buzzing with life because it's proven that connecting 2 landscapes increases biodiversity on both ends. The main challenge we're facing as Ontario's cities grow is that we can't afford to keep adding systems that lack biodiversity outside of our existing farming systems. So to developers and government officials, we need to ensure growth is happening in the right places. This can be done through transfer of development. Transferring development rights means that developers can make their buildings higher in exchange for setting aside landscape in other areas. And those landscapes would then connect over time. To urban planners and architects, and to those who have no idea what I just said, we need to avoid isolated gardens and green spaces and create pathways instead. If we fill underused areas and curbsides with native plants rather than concrete or grass, and make links to larger areas of land, Ontario could become a leader at balancing out its less biodiverse areas. Connection is how our cities can become more like ecosystems. I'd like you to think about this. Birdhouses are good for birds, but they also repel mosquitoes, which, unless you love mosquitoes, is a pretty good deal. Green roofs provide habitat while also collecting stormwater to help with Ontario's flooding. So yes, we can actually benefit from nature at the same time as we support its conservation. That architect in Norway I spoke with studied the benefits of having contact with nature more regularly and how it makes communities more environmentally productive. And so by creating links in our landscape and allowing for more biodiversity, the advantages simply outweigh the effort. So this all started with the honeybee, but I went from trying to save something to where do we fit in? To counter the lack of biodiversity of farmland, the design of our cities has to play a role in making Ontario a leader in urban biodiversity, in making Ontario a leader in tackling climate change. It's exciting that we live in Ontario because we have these bustling urban cities, but also thick, dense forest. Imagine we could connect these landscapes. We're all designers, and symbiosis can only be achieved when we link together. Thank you.